as we look and stare into the abyss. You never know what's staring back at you. It's coming.
All these voices.
Don't worry, Sweet. This will only hurt a lot.
We had tons of activity, including a demon attack that called JC, the founder of Shadows Pit Paranormal, to puke all over the place like projectile vomit. It was insane, and he got scratched on the neck. We captured a disembodied face that was screaming, and we also captured a couple different full-body apparitions, which was badass. Now, Baba Yaga was a Slavic witch, but she was also a supernatural guardian. And basically what she did was beat back the forces of evil from the realm of the dead, made a deal with a bunch of witches in the woods in Armenia. She sold her soul, a nasty creature that I have actually had a run-in with myself. The bastard scratched the hell out of my car and jumped on it. It was a mess. I tell the story in the show.
It's just the ghost of you and me. It's just the smoking gasoline. It's just the ghost of you and me. Of you and me. Don't let them take you away.
They say staring into the abyss.
Don't let them bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in
I'm
your
saying
mind. Don't let them bring
I
you
already am lost.
down.
Staring into the abyss. Remember, there might be something staring back. Come get awesome.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me as always, my co-host, old boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. How's everybody tonight?
July 20th was the 50th year anniversary of the United States first landing people on the moon. So in honor of that amazing achievement, on tonight's episode, we will be going over the conspiracy theory that states that the moon landings were faked. And they didn't actually happen, we didn't actually land on the moon, but instead the entire thing was filmed on a soundstage in Hollywood. Now, there are several major parts of this conspiracy theory, and tonight I intend to examine each one. I will give you both sides, starting with the claim and the reasons that they believe that this particular point proves that the moon landing was a hoax. Once I have stated their case for you, I will give you the science and the facts that will help us all reach a conclusion on whether this thing is actually real. Did we actually land on the moon? Was it a hoax? We'll get in depth on this tonight, and hopefully by the end of this, you will have a definitive answer one way or the other. Sound fair? Okay. So let's kick this thing off with the shadows. Now, this part of the theory states that the astronaut shadows appear to be cast in different directions instead of all being parallel. The idea here is that if we were on the moon with a single light source, which would be the sun, all the shadows should be going in the same direction. The fact that they're going in different directions proves multiple light sources, which they believe is artificial set lighting on a Hollywood soundstage. So that is this part of the theory. That is their side of it. That is what they believe. So where they go wrong here is with the initial assumption that if the astronauts were on the moon, there would only be a single light source, the sun. Now, while it's true that the sun was the main light source, you also have several other secondary light sources at play here. You have the reflective light of the Earth, and you have the reflective light of the moon's surface, and every hill and crevice on the surface. Anyone with a basic understanding of how light works knows that multiple light sources create multiple shadows. Now, that is, after all, the basis of their theory, that there were multiple light sources, and that proves it wasn't on the moon but on a soundstage. Now, they're right about multiple light sources. They just don't understand that on the moon there are multiple light sources as well. Now, remember how bright the moon is when you look at it. If you're outside on a bright sunny day, the sunlight reflects off of objects all around you, and it creates all kinds of weird, funky shadows in all different directions. The same effect is happening on the moon. The next part of this theory that I would like to examine is that the flag appears to be waving, and since there's no wind on the moon, that proves that it was shot on Earth. Now, this is probably the most popular part of this whole hoax theory, and the one that most people will throw at you when they're trying to convince you that the United States faked the moon landing, we didn't actually go there, blah, blah, blah. So the idea here is that the flags planted during the moon landing, because there was more than one, that the flags planted shake and that they appear to wave after they're being handled, and this proves that it couldn't have been filmed on the moon. That just couldn't happen in the vacuum of space. So here we have another case of the people that are strutting around telling you that we didn't land on the moon, and they're like laughing at you because they're so intellectually superior to you. This is another example of them just plain out not knowing what the hell they're talking about. They simply do not have a good understanding of the vacuum of space. The vacuum of space is precisely why you can see it move the way it does. And I'm going to explain this. And I'm going to try to explain it in a relatively easy to understand way. If the flag was surrounded by air, the flag would then be subject to air resistance. Now, this means that it would flap and wave in a strong wind, but it would also settle down very, very quickly as the air buffers against its motion. Okay? So the air that it's surrounded by will act against the flag and cause its motion to stop. In space, there is no air, and any slight movement of the flag will continue until the friction of the flag's material slows it down, because there's no air present to act against it. The flag on the moon can only be seen waving and moving, while the astronauts are handling it, and for a short time afterwards. The motion of the flag does not come from the wind, like they think, but actually from the astronauts moving it while positioning it. This is what gives the material the kinetic energy to make it move. And with no air to slow it down, that movement continues until the friction of the material itself eventually causes it to stop. When the flag is sitting alone without being touched for a fairly long period of time, it does not move at all. It just sits there the way it's supposed to. Now, the flags do not hang limp. The reason for that is the top of all the flags in the moon footage contain a metal rod that holds the flag up and keeps it extended. This was done so that the flags would not appear to droop while they're just standing there. They don't want depressing looking flags just hanging all limp. They wanted loud and proud flags standing at attention. So that is why they appear that way. It's because they have rods to hold them up. The next part of this theory that I would like to examine has to do with the Van Allen belts. Now, as I was telling old boy before we did this show, I would love to do this show because it's really in my wheelhouse. So this is one that really gets a lot of people because it sounds really, really scientific and smart. And since the overwhelming majority of people don't even really know what the Van Allen belts are or what kind of radiation they contain, they are not equipped to be able to properly judge whether this one is true or not. They just hear someone telling them about this mysterious belt of radiation that surrounds the Earth. And they hear them saying that it would be impossible for anyone to cross through that without having their face melt off like the Nazis and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, people hear that and they say, whoa, radiation? Melting Nazi faces? That's scary. It must be legit. Well, first, let me tell you what the Van Allen belts are. Okay, they are areas of radiation that surround the Earth. They originate from the solar wind being trapped by the Earth's magnetic field. Now, you might say, well, there you have it. You said it yourself, James. Radiation surrounding the Earth. It came out of your own mouth. Radiation is bad. We all know that. The question here is not whether there is radiation surrounding the Earth, because there is. Absolutely is. The real question here is what kinds of radiation are we talking about? That's what's important. The Van Allen belts are made up solely of charged particles originating from the sun's corona. So we're talking primarily protons, electrons, and alpha particles. Now, these charged particles are ridiculously easy to shield against. The alpha particles can be blocked by a simple piece of paper, and the electrons or the beta particles can be stopped by a few millimeters of aluminum. Now, gamma radiation, that is a real mother to stop. Extremely difficult. But guess what kind of radiation is not present in the Van Allen belts? That's right. There is no gamma radiation in the Van Allen belts. The other issue here is that the belts are not enclosed shells. That means there's gaps. Now, during the Apollo missions, the astronauts completely missed the inner belts. Didn't even touch them. And they went through the thinner parts of the outer belts at a very, very high rate of speed. Going through the thinner sections at a high rate of speed minimized any kind of risk from exposure, and it allowed them to easily pass through them. Now, a good way to envision this in your head is when people walk on fire. You've all seen that on TV, or some of you have even seen it in person, where they will build a long, long fire and they let it burn down to coals. So you have all these hot coals, and then somebody walks right across them, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that dude just walked across hot coals. That had to burn the hell out of his feet. But of course, his feet aren't burned, and it's all good. No problem. The reason for that is that he walked quickly over top the coals. You didn't have time for your feet to burn because you were constantly moving. So the temperature didn't get too high on your feet to where they would burn them. Also, when you're doing the coals, this is another little trick here to this that not a lot of people understand. When they're doing the coals, there's a very fine layer of ash that ends up over top the coals that also helps to insulate the foot so it doesn't burn. Now that is how the firewalking is pulled off, and in a way it's kind of how this is done as well, because they're going at a high rate of speed through a thin section. There's not enough time for any kind of harmful radiation to build up, any kind of harmful levels of radiation to build up, and for it to do any damage really, because they're through it. The next part of this theory that we're going to examine is the belief that because you cannot see any stars in space behind the astronauts in any of the photos or the footage, that means that it was filmed in a studio. So they think that NASA decided to intentionally leave the stars out and to use a black background instead. Because if they had included the stars, then you'd be able to use those stars to figure out that it was filmed on Earth and not the moon. You'd be able to kind of look at it and say, okay, I know that was filmed here because this star is here and this star is here. That means it had to be here. That's the idea. Well, first of all, when the pictures and the footage were shot, it was during daytime on the moon. This means that the sun was shining fully on that portion of the lunar surface. When you go outside at night during one of the stages of the moon, where most or all of the moon is visible here on Earth, think about all the light that is reflected off the moon that comes to Earth. It is enough light for you to be able to see where you're going, and if the sky is clear enough, it's even enough light for you to cast a shadow at night. Now, if you have that much reflective light from the lunar surface reaching the Earth, imagine how bright the moon's surface actually is on the moon. So you have full sun shining on the surface. It is shining not only on the surface, but it is also shining on the astronauts who are wearing white spacesuits. It is shining on the white lander, and it's shining all over the surface. That is a hell of a lot of sunlight and reflected light. Now, if you're here on Earth, like say where I live, out on the mountain, and it's a clear night, there's not a lot of clouds, and you can see a sky full of beautiful stars. But what happens if you go half an hour or an hour down the road into a large town or a city? Then you have all the lights from the city. You have street lights, neon lights, etc., all that kind of stuff. And when you look up in the sky, in that setting, you barely see any of the stars. And on some nights, you can't see any at all. In the case of the moon footage and the pictures, the stars do not show up because their light is very faint when compared to the light on the surface. And they're also very, very far away. Now, you can see them with the naked eye, but they're not going to show up on film. You can test this yourself right now wherever you are. After the show, go outside, if it's nighttime, and try to take a picture of the stars with your cell phone. Now, unless you're in an area like I am, where there is no light pollution, and you also have a very, very good camera on your cell phone, unless those two things are true, you're probably not going to have stars show up in your picture. And if you do have them show up, they're not going to look anything like they look when you look at them with your eyes. They're just going to be little bitty dots, so you're barely going to see anything. Now, NASA equipped the mission with very, very good cameras, the best they could get. But in order for the stars to show up on that film, the aperture would have to be adjusted in such a way that everything else, including the astronauts, would just be a white blur. And who would want to see those pictures? If you want to take a photo of a brightly lit scene, your shutter speed has to be fast, and your aperture has to be very, very small. In this situation, with that setup, the faint light of the stars simply will not show up. Now, there's several more of these different points in the theory, and we're going to move through them. But some of these we're going to go quickly because they're fairly easy. The next one is, if we really went to the moon back in 1969, why haven't we been back? That's fairly simple to understand. It's pretty straightforward. Not a lot of science to this one. Well, first of all, we did go back multiple times in later Apollo missions. The last Apollo mission that landed men on the moon was Apollo 17 in 1972. But we have sent different missions to the moon all the way up into like 2012, to where we sent things to map the moon and take pictures and that sort of thing. But the last Apollo mission that landed men on the moon was Apollo 17 and 72. Now, this wasn't supposed to be the end of the moon missions. NASA had plans of setting up a lunar base. They had plans of many, many more missions. But the simple answer here is all of that changed because our priorities as a nation changed. America got distracted with the Vietnam War. And by the time all that was over, the thought was that we were going to move on to something that was better than rockets. They didn't want to keep messing with rockets like the Apollo used, the Saturn rockets and stuff like that. They wanted to instead focus on the space shuttle. And they also wanted to focus on a new thing they were working on, which was the International Space Station. And we could return to the moon anytime we chose, and in the future I'm sure we will, but their priorities were instead the space shuttle and the International Space Station. The next one has to do with a picture that Neil Armstrong took of Buzz Aldrin. Now, in this picture, you can see the reflection of Neil Armstrong in Aldrin's visor. They claim that because Armstrong is not holding a camera in the reflection, that somehow proves that it is a hoax. Now, this is another one that's very easy to deal with. The cameras that the astronauts had were mounted on the front of their spacesuits. The reason for this is, frankly, it's impossible to use a normal camera while you're wearing a spacesuit because the suit is way too bulky. You just don't have the dexterity in your fingers and everything to be able to do that. So they needed something that was easier to use, something that wouldn't get lost, that would be right there and would go with them wherever they went. So they mounted them on the front of the suits. In the reflection, you can see Armstrong has his hands near the middle of his suit, and that's where the camera was located. The next one is the belief that when the lunar module descended onto the lunar surface, it didn't scatter any dust, and it did not leave a crater from the rocket blast that slowed its descent. Now, during the landing, the astronauts were traveling horizontally for quite a while to find the right landing spot. That was important because they wanted to film the ascent. They wanted to film them leaving. The only way to film that properly is to land in a precise spot, because there's a hell of a lot of math that has to be done here. Okay, they tried to film the ascent multiple times during multiple missions, and they failed. The first time they failed because the camera would not actually tilt upwards. It had a malfunction. It wouldn't work. The second time, it did work. It did tilt upwards like it was supposed to, but the ascent was messed up because the module flew right out of the scene. It flew right out of frame, and they couldn't see it anymore. So it didn't look really good. The reason for that is because they screwed up the spot they landed. They had a precise spot marked out where they needed to land. The camera is mounted on the rover, and it is controlled through remote by someone on the ground and on Earth. And they have it all worked out because there is a delay in the signal reaching Earth. So they had to work it out mathematically where they knew exactly where the craft was going to be. They knew the rate of ascent, so they could figure out the rate that the camera had to pan up to catch it perfectly as it lifted off, and it looked wonderful. But the astronauts messed up the landing. They didn't land in the right spot, so that's why the second time got screwed up. The third was the charm. The third time that they tried it, everything went wonderfully, and it was beautiful the way they filmed it. But that is the reason why the astronauts were traveling horizontally for a while, because they had to get to that correct landing spot. So while they were traveling horizontally, the thrusters, they weren't pointed downwards, so they would not have kicked up any dust. When the landing module finally stopped and touched down, you can see dust being blown up. As far as there being no crater, there's really not going to be a crater because the astronauts did not need to use a very large blast to slow themselves down because they weren't traveling at an extremely high rate of speed, and the moon's gravity is only 1/6 of that of Earth. So that means that the landing was much more gentle. It wasn't like they were come hurtling down towards the ground. They had to use a lot of thrust to keep them from crashing. It was a lot slower than that. So they didn't have to use big amounts of thrust. That means you're not going to have a large crater. So I believe that just about covers all of the major points in the theory that the moon landing was a hoax. So now what I want to do is I want to go through some of the absolute mountain of evidence that we have that we actually did land on the moon. First, we have a very large quantity of lunar surface samples. This includes rocks and stuff like that, that were brought back by all of the different Apollo missions. These samples match those that were brought back by the Soviet unmanned missions, and they do not resemble anything else on Earth. Now, there are many scientists all over the world that have spent their entire careers studying these samples. And if they were fake, believe me, one of them would have spoken out. And they absolutely would not have wasted their entire careers on something they knew to be a hoax. That makes absolutely no sense. Why would you go through all you have to go through to have a job like this? All the years of college, all of the expense, the money that you have to shell out for all that schooling. Why would you waste your entire career after all of that on something you knew to be a hoax? We also have tons of photographs and video footage taken on the moon. Now, close-up footage of dust being kicked up by the astronauts while they're on the moon, or by the wheels of the lunar rover. That close-up footage shows that the dust fell parabolically, and that is what would be expected in a vacuum. If the landing was shot on Earth, as these people claim it was, then the dust would puff up into the air before it fell to the ground. But it doesn't do that. Also, many of the people that actually went to the moon and participated in these missions are still alive, and they can testify to the fact that the missions were real. They can tell you it's not a hoax. We also have many pieces of equipment that were brought back from the moon missions. Ham radio operators in the United States and in other countries are witnesses to the fact that the lunar television signal, that is the signal that was sent from the moon to Earth to broadcast what was going on there, that signal could be directly picked up with antennas that were pointed at the moon. The QST magazine, published by the American Radio Relay League, carried articles on the reception and the equipment that was used to receive it. If the signal had come from anywhere other than the moon, it would have been very, very obvious to anyone that was trying to pick up that signal. And I just do not believe that every single person who picked up that signal is part of a vast conspiracy to cover up a hoax that has gone on for 50 years and nobody has said anything. Makes no sense. Also, astronomers were able to spot the spacecraft of the Apollo missions when they were in Earth orbit and during their reentry. 3 sets of retroreflectors, which are prisms that reflect incoming light in the direction that it came from. 3 sets of retroreflectors were placed on the moon by the Apollo missions, more specifically by Apollo 11, Apollo 14, and Apollo 15. They were placed there to be targets for ranging lasers. These retroreflectors have been used extensively by independent parties. So people that are not connected to NASA, they're not under their payroll, completely independent, have used these and can verify that they're there. Apollo 14's retroreflector was used by McDonald Observatory in Texas only 7 hours after the moon had risen, right after it got put up. In 2009, the Indian moon orbiter Chandrayaan-1 took photographs of the Apollo 15 landing site and the lunar rover tracks. So here we have photographs coming from India that prove that the landing site was there and that the rover tracks were there for Apollo 15. Also in 2009, NASA launched the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. The purpose of that was to map the moon's surface in great detail. Now, this captured images of the Apollo landing sites and of the Soviet sites as well. In mid-2012, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter confirmed that all but one of the American flags are still standing on the moon. The one that is not standing was the flag from Apollo 11. The reason it's not standing is kind of funny, actually. It was set up too close to the landing module. And when the ascent rockets fired to blast them back off from the moon, it knocked the thing over, knocked the flag over. In 2013, China's U-2 rover landed on the moon. Now, the footage taken from the surface of the moon from that rover exactly matches the footage from the Apollo missions. It looks exactly the same. Now, as you can see by this point in the show, there's absolutely no doubt that we did, in fact, land men on the moon multiple times during the Apollo missions. And that Old Glory is still standing proudly on the moon. Anyone that tries to tell you differently is either lying to you or is ignorant of the actual facts. My home country of America put men on the moon. But this is not just an American achievement. This moment in history is something that should be celebrated by all of mankind, everywhere in the world. Because what was proven is that it is possible to land on another planet. In this case, it's a moon or another celestial body, but we proved that it's possible to land there. And for human beings to actually make that trip and survive. Now that is pretty damn spectacular when you consider the technology that they were working with at the time. Your smartphone that you have right now, that you use to scroll Facebook, play on Instagram, take pictures of your dinner, that smartphone has over 100,000 times the computing power that they had to put men on the moon. 100,000 times more computing power. A standard digital watch has more computing power than they had to send men to the moon. Could you imagine what we could accomplish with the technology that we have today if we would all just stop fighting against each other and work together? Anything is possible if we work together. Now, I don't know if that will ever actually happen. I would like to see it happen. I hope that it happens someday where we can all get along and work together to take on some of these huge problems that we face in the world. But I don't know if it's in our nature because we're kind of contrary, to say the least. But that's my hope. So I'm going to throw over to Old Boy now and get his opinions on the moon landings, on whether he believes the conspiracies or whether he thinks that we did actually land on the moon. And also find out a little bit of what the moon landings meant to him in his life. Because I know for me, they were kind of a big deal. You know, the idea that we could leave the planet and go somewhere else was mind-opening to me. It was amazing. Now, I remember when I was a little kid watching the Challenger explode. Because it was a big deal that the Challenger was going up, because you had the first teacher in space was going up, Krista McCullough. And they had that on TV for everybody to watch. And in our school, and in schools all over America, kids were watching this as it happened. We stopped what we were doing. There was no more schoolwork being done. Every classroom had a TV brought into it, and we all watched the Challenger go up because we all wanted to see Krista McCullough, the first teacher to ever go into space. It was a big deal. So I remember watching as that thing exploded. And you want to talk about something that's traumatizing. You want to talk about kids freaking out. That was an amazing day. But the idea that we were able to go to the moon before that, long before that, and actually put people on the surface of the moon was unbelievable to me. And it really shaped my desire to work in that field and my desire to come up with interesting things. Now, I was a very, very smart kid. I was a member of Mensa, and so I had the opportunity to actually follow those dreams and to be able to work on a project. And I was very, very blessed to do so. So for me, the moon landings really were a big deal. And I hate to see a bunch of people that don't even understand what they're talking about. They don't understand the science behind it. I hate to see them bad-mouthing NASA, bad-mouthing all of the engineers and all of the people that were behind those missions to get those astronauts there. Because it takes a hell of a lot of work to put one of these things together. And those people worked tirelessly to do so. And then to have somebody who really has no actual information, who doesn't know what they're talking about, bad-mouthing those people and belittling their life's work, to me is unexcusable. I think that's terrible. And that's why I wanted to do this show. That's why, with the 50th anniversary happening on the 20th, which if you're listening to this live on the radio, that was yesterday, for that to happen is terrible. And I wanted to kind of debunk all these theories and show that, yes, we did actually land on the moon. It actually happened, and it was one hell of an amazing achievement when you consider the tiny little bit of computing power that we actually possessed back then. But we did it. And it's something to be proud of. So, like I said, I want to throw over to Old Boy, and I want to get his opinion on this and find out what it meant to him in his life. So, Old Boy, go ahead, brother.
Thank you, brother. And just so everybody knows, James is really into this stuff. NASA, because he worked for him and did stuff for him. It's really interesting to me because the funny thing is we did the Area 51 show last week, and this is funny we're doing this because somebody made a comment on the one of the show we shared on Facebook saying it. Oh, you'll probably find that's where they did the recording for the fake moon landing. So somebody actually said something. I'm glad you said this because I just remember that they said it. That's probably where we faked the moon landing. That's funny because somebody actually said that and they actually believe this. I don't believe it. I know we landed on the moon. I know we landed. I'll tell you this. I won't be surprised we've done other things they just don't tell the truth about. But we can't go there. I believe they landed on the moon. I believe that what it is there's people who just don't want to believe things. Like the flat earth theory. There's people who still believe that. There's still people who they hear somebody and they want to believe it. And it doesn't matter what you tell them. They'll argue with you. So we don't want to get back into that. But you could tell them whatever you want and have all the proof in the world, and they'll still won't believe it. So there's a lot of people who don't believe we landed on the moon. They believe it was fake Hollywood. So we just been sitting on the Earth. No one's been doing anything. China's gone to the moon. Russia's gone to the moon. So I guess they're faking it too. But what I'm saying is I don't believe in it, that it was fake. I believe that we actually did it. I just think some people they don't get reality. They only care about what's going on in their world. Because there's people who don't believe in the giant sea turtle. I saw that too the other day. That they show the video of the giant sea turtle. It's fake. It's not real, and they exist, and people still don't believe it. It's because they haven't seen it in real life, but it's on TV. They're just faking that. That's a robot. That's what I've seen. People who actually believe this. This is crazy because people actually believe that we faked the moon landing, and I don't understand it. I get it. People make these. The funny thing is, it's the same people who believe aliens and want to go to Area 51. They don't believe we landed on the moon, but we talk to aliens and we have alien technology down in a cellar in Nevada. So that's crazy to me because you're contradicting what you believe in. Because you're saying aliens exist and we deal with them, and we do, but then we can't go to the moon. And that makes no sense to me. We've gone to space. You've seen it. Spaceships exist. Okay, space shuttles do exist. And like James said, the one blew up. I was in class when that happened too. And that was crazy. And come to find out more stuff about that, we might do a show about that one day too, because there's a conspiracies coming out on that one where they are alive still before they and stuff like that. When they blew up, there's a conspiracy coming out about that. And come on, guys, you believe in space aliens, and you believe that we have all this technology, but then you don't believe we've gone to the moon, or we faked the moon somehow landing. I understand people are going to get mad at this because I know they are. Just like Area 51, some people said some things because they truly want to believe this. Because they had some guy who claims he knew somebody who worked on the set when it happened, so that must mean it's true. But then they believe that there's aliens on Area 51 because they heard the same thing from the same guy who works at the same place and worked there for 10 years. Because I read that on one of our comments. Somebody said they knew somebody there that worked there for 10 years. And see, the problem with that is I know people who worked for military. You can't talk even when you retire. So they're either full of crap or they're listening to somebody who's probably lying. You got to watch who you talk to on Facebook or Instagram or who you meet online. They may not. I've met people that say they're this and that, and they come to find out they're lying. There's people just want to be famous and they want to act like they know everything. Like James is saying, there's all these people who think they know everything. And I know there's somebody going to argue with our show this week. I guarantee it. Somebody's going to think they know everything, and they know somebody that worked at at the time it did the filming for the show. Cousin's brother was there when it happened, or they were the security guard. And that's what people are going to say. And that's what's funny about it, because it's probably something they heard or they talked to somebody, so they believe it right off the bat. People believe things so easily. Do some research, like James said. I'm not going to say you're wrong or nothing. Do research. Don't read something that some professor wrote that's his opinion, or he heard it from somebody he knew. Look it up yourself. Just like the Area 51 thing, look, that is getting so ridiculous, but it's funny that people actually want to try to do this. Just like this one. I'm glad he brought this up, and I'm glad we're doing this show, because I wanted to talk about this. I've always liked space, guys. I love aliens, stuff like that. I've never been in the movies, though. Some movies like Star Wars, Star Trek's cool, and Predator and Alien, those are cool, but I'm not like super into sci-fi. But I like space. I've always wanted to go to another planet. That would be great. Who wouldn't? It interests me. I think there's aliens. I've always believed that. I don't care what anybody thinks. It's impossible for us to be the only planet with millions and billions and trillions of stars and planets, that's mathematically impossible for us to be the only creatures. Anything, the only thing on anywhere else is all plain, nothing else is there. I don't believe that. I'm sorry. And if you don't care, you want to argue with me, that's fine. Do whatever you got to believe. Believe whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you anything different. That's how I believe. You have your opinions, I have mine. But I love space. I've always wanted to go to the moon, Mars, just to go up in space. If I had the money, because I know you can pay like $1 million now and you can go up to space. That would be great. I would love it. Just to see this, just all see the Earth so high up in the air. It just looks like a little bunch of Kellers, and it would be awesome. But yes, I believe the moon. We landed on the moon. I believe it happened. So there you go, James.
To me, the worst part of this is it makes conspiracy theory people look bad. Make no mistake, not every conspiracy theory is ridiculous. Some of them are true. Then some of them are just stupid. I don't mean to be rude when I say that, but there's just no other way to say it. It's dumb. It's the same as the flat earth crap. You have people that claim the earth is flat. That is the most ridiculous garbage I've ever heard. I did an entire show where I went through 40 minutes explaining scientifically every reason why they're wrong. It's so obvious that they're wrong. The problem is when you have this kind of thing happening that's so easily disproved. We have pictures of the damn landing site taken by other countries, for God's sakes. You know it's there. It's so easy to prove that we landed on the moon. So when you have something like this, it makes all of the other people look bad who are actually onto something. Like the government spying on you through your video game system, your Xbox, the things that have like the Kinect, and through Alexa and those kind of things. That's all real. Now, before that was actually released, that was a conspiracy theory. The program is called Vault 7. It's real. Okay, they can turn your camera on your phone, your microphone on your phone anytime they choose and listen or watch what you're doing. And they do when they want to. They can do so. They're supposed to have to get a warrant to do it, but they don't ever actually get a warrant to do it. They don't listen to that. They don't care. They do whatever the hell they want. Anything that is connected to the internet like that has a camera or has a microphone, can spy on you. Every cell phone is preloaded with Google, and it has that little search with the little microphone on it, where all you have to do is say, "Okay, Google," and it will listen to what you're saying, and you can say like, "Okay, Google, where do you find the best Chinese food while you're in New York City?" And it will give you a list of restaurants that you can go to, blah, blah, blah. Well, come to find out, they're listening even when you don't say those words. Whatever words trigger it. You know, there's a phrase you have to say with Alexa. There's a phrase you have to say with the Amazon thing. Each one of them has a set of words you're supposed to say to activate it. But come to find out, they listen even when those words aren't said. And who do you think is listening? Do you think it's just Google? I can tell you that people like the NSA, the CIA, they have access to all of your devices. They have access to everything in your home that is connected to the internet. That stuff is true. It's proven true. There have been documents released through the Freedom of Information Act that prove beyond a shadow of a doubt it's true. A lot of the stuff from WikiLeaks proves it is true, beyond a shadow of a doubt. There are a lot of different things like that that are 100% true. But when you have goofy stuff like this, that is so easily proven false, they put that on the same level as the conspiracy people that are saying stuff like Vault 7. And that makes every one of them look crazy. When a lot of them aren't crazy, a lot of them are telling the truth. And it comes out later on that they were absolutely right. What was once conspiracy theory becomes fact because the documents get released. Now, I'm not saying every single conspiracy theory is true, because they're not. There are a lot of goofy ones. But there are some out there that are 100% true. There are some out there that I personally know are 100% true. But I can't say they're 100% true because the documents have not been released to prove that they're 100% true. So I don't like that you have some conspiracy theories out there that are just goofy. And they're so easily disproven. There's absolutely nothing to them. But yet, the people that believe them will scream and holler about how true they are. And they always act like they're way smarter than you. Like somehow, because you don't believe whatever goofy thing they're trying to make you believe, that somehow that makes you dumb. You're somehow less than them because they know this and you don't. And the reality of the situation is the majority of the time, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Because when you actually break it down and go through it like I did tonight and like I did on that Flat Earth show, when you actually go through it, it doesn't hold up. It almost never holds up when these people are doing this. That's the problem. And I don't mean to cast aspersions at anybody, but you do have people who do a hell of a lot of talking that don't know what they're talking about. And that's a big problem. The reason for that is nobody wants to do the research anymore. Nobody is willing to take the time to actually learn about these things, to learn the science behind it, to learn everything that goes into it so they understand what is happening. They don't want to do that. They would rather just see a meme or see something somebody else said and say, oh, look, there it is, that's why. And then they run with that and they just keep talking about it and saying it, but they don't know if it's true or not because they've never looked into it. They've never done the research to learn whether or not it's actually true. They're just saying it's true because that's what they heard. That is a huge problem in the world today, I think. And it leads to a lot of arguments. It leads to a lot of misconceptions. It leads to a lot of false narratives being spread because the people simply don't know because they haven't looked it up. Now, we are not a show that tries to say nothing is real. We are not a show that every time something sounds unbelievable, we say, nope, doesn't exist, you're full of crap. We are actually kind of the exact opposite of that. What makes our show different is I do that research. I find out whether it's real or not. I spend the hundreds of hours sometimes it takes to really learn this stuff and to find out what is real and what is not. And the interesting thing is on that journey, we have found out that a lot of things that most people think aren't real are real. And we've also found out that some things that a lot of people think are real probably aren't. And we have brought a lot of different kind of cool shows like that to you guys. And I hope that you enjoy these shows. I hope that you have an appreciation for the amount of information that you're receiving here. Because it's not easy to come by. It's a lot of work to do this. So with that being said, I'm going to throw back over to Old Boy so that he can do his final wrap-up and shout-outs.
Thank you, brother. And just like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed this show. This was one he's been wanting to do, but we've been hearing some stuff now after the Area 51 thing. And just like I said, please don't do the Area 51 thing. There's even the Air Force, the Marines, the military, the government are already warning you you're going to go to jail. So that's one more from last week's episode. And like I said, I really enjoy this. Like I said, I've always liked space. So I hope you guys like this episode. I want to thank everybody on Parax Radio and YouTube for Staring in the Abyss and Tales from the Abyss, our YouTube show. You guys can always see that on James Hershey Jr.'s YouTube page. He'll tell you where to go. You can get, now we got fleece blankets out at the store now, guys. You can get blankets of Staring into the Abyss, shirts, cups, whatever you want. Pretty much it's there. Leggings, iPhone cases. I think they got Android cases. I don't know that one for fact yet. We don't have hats. That's the one thing that we don't have. I know that. I think we can get beanies in the wintertime. We got sweatshirts, all kinds of stuff you can get there. He'll tell you where to go and look it up. I hope everybody has a great night. Blessed be sugar ladies, misfits, monster hunters, and demon lovers. I love you. Have a good night.
There are a lot of very interesting and cool things coming very soon to the store. We will be having hats very soon. It is in the works. Beanies as well. And there's all kinds of other stuff coming that is absolutely amazing to me. We're going to be doing like dresses and all kinds of stuff soon. All of those designs are in the works. The capabilities to produce them are in the works. It's just a matter of time before it happens. So soon you will be able to get hats. You will be able to get beanies, all that kind of stuff. Because I know a lot of people have asked for hats. We're working on it. The people that I use are getting all that together so that it can be done. So we will have those sometime in the near future. We do have Android cases, though. We have iPhone and Android cases. We have posters. You can even do like canvas wall art, which is pretty cool. We have shirts, hoodies, leggings, even like baby clothes and stuff. If you, for some reason, want a Staring into the Abyss baby outfit, I guess you could get that too. For those that are interested, the store is teespring.com/stores/staring into the abyss. That's TEESPRING.com/stores, has an S on the end, /staring into the abyss. That's where all of that merch is. And we are working hard on new designs and new products for you all the time. Old boy comes up with some pretty cool ideas, and he'll shoot the stuff over to me, and then I go through all of the math part where I have to make sure that it will fit the shirt correctly and look right, and the pixels are right. All that kind of nuts and bolts stuff that goes into actually designing the shirt so that you can buy it. That's something that we're trying to do more with. It started out, honestly, just as something that we did because we had a lot of people that wanted to buy shirts. And they kept asking, and we didn't have any shirts. So finally I said, you know what, let's just do the damn shirts so that people will be happy. So then we started looking into how to do it. And that's where the store came from. And we just kind of kept expanding from there. As people wanted new stuff, we would make it happen. So that's what's going on with hats and beanies and all that. You guys wanted it, so they will be there. It's just a matter of getting all the stuff in order so that it can be done. But it is in the works. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. That is where you can find all of the episodes of Staring into the Abyss. That is where you can find all of the episodes of our TV show, Tales from the Abyss. There's also paranormal news videos that I do on there. There's also little side videos that we've both done and other members of the team have done. We're going to be doing a lot more with that coming soon. With Tales from the Abyss, we have the West Coast team that Old Boy heads up, and we have the East Coast team that I head up. And there are multiple people on each team. So one thing I want to try to do in the future is kind of introduce you to more of those people. We're going to start doing like some masterclass kind of videos where like we take a piece of equipment, for example, and we show the equipment, we explain how to use it, what all the functions of the equipment are, how you actually use it in the field, that kind of thing. And I'd like to do videos like that on all kinds of different aspects of the paranormal. I think it would be interesting and it would be helpful to people that are just starting out that really don't have that information. They don't know how to do some of the things that we do. So we're going to be doing that, and I'm going to be having different members of the teams make those videos so that you can kind of see them and be introduced to who they are and get to know them a little bit better. So that's coming in the future as well. We got a whole lot of stuff going on, so please forgive us if we kind of hop around a little bit. That's just the nature of the beast, because a lot of this is just me and Old Boy, and we don't have gigantic teams of people working on stuff. We kind of do everything ourselves. So there's a lot of really cool stuff coming in the future. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you learned something from it. I hope that if you're a person that the moon landing meant something to, if you hate to see it denigrated the way it is, then I hope that I've given you some ammunition to where when somebody does mouth off and say, oh, it never happened, blah, 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 and they give whatever thing, now you have the answer to why that's wrong. And you can tell them, no, you're wrong, and this is why. Now, I can't guarantee you they're going to listen to you, because most people like that don't listen. But at least you have the truth, and you can know for yourself, and you can teach others if they are willing to listen. So with that being said, we are completely out of time. So thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you greatly. And until I speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do we. Bye-bye.